Chairman. Ms. Lav, who in your opinion is the biggest loser if a pension fund goes broke or is severely underfunded?
Well, ultimately, the pension funds are, in essence, backed up by the full faith and credit of the state. So in the very unlikely situation that a major pension fund would not be able to pay benefits, presumably they would pay it from current tax dollars. That's how they paid, prior to the 1970s, all state and local pensions just about were paid on a pay-as-you-go basis. There were not these pension funds, and then they started investing and pre-funding their pension funds, around 1980, and they built up this $3 trillion fund in the pensions. And pensions are not, in danger of not being able to pay their benefits. That's just not the case in most situations. I mean, if you want to look at the most extreme, even Illinois will be able to pay its pensions.
So you don't feel like there's any benefit to an additional amount of transparency for the employees that are going to benefit from the pension system?
Transparency is a word that's used in a lot of different ways. And when what's called transparency puts up a construct that really isn't how much that is different from how much states and localities have to invest in order to make their pension funds whole and to pay their obligations, then you have confusion rather than transparency, in my opinion, because you have two different numbers and people don't know what to think about it, and if they look at an inflated and a very large liability, then some other things are going to happen. People are going to try and raise taxes to fill it. People are going to cut other programs, or they're going to say, oh, we can't keep this pension fund. We're going to have to go to a defined contribution or something else because
so
it's liability. It's confusion.
Your theory is that transparency increases confusion.
No, not necessarily any transparency. I'm saying that I don't think that this is what we're talking about here is good transparency. I think that what GASB is proposing in its new rules is good transparency. It has a much more realistic view of how it is that of the funding level and the liabilities of pension funds.
Well, in my previous career in the state legislature, I served on the Texas Pension Review Board, and it was not a review board that took very seriously its responsibility for years until we got a governor that decided that maybe we ought to meet and maybe we ought to actually do our job. And we found that when and our job was simply to just publish the same kind of information that's in this bill, and we found that it was not we got the most resistance from the public entities that administrated these plans, and we got the most enthusiasm and the most inquiries from the actual employees that once they were able to look at the disclosure and the comparisons of the Dallas Police and Fire Pension Fund versus the El Paso Police and Fire Pension Fund, that's when we began our main input came from the employees, and we found that the increased transparency benefited really the employees because they then began to demand an accountability from the pension funds that they were depending on for their retirement. I think your first answer was very telling in that, in your opinion, the ultimate loser is not the employee, but the state or the entity. I think that at some point the employee needs to be more worried about the content and the investment policies and the transparency of their pension planning and cannot always rely on the state or the county or the city or the school district bail a system out.
Well, that would be a very rare situation. I think the GASB rules will create the kind of transparency and comparability that you're talking about, which I think is good and important. And
we found that GASB was a reactive entity and not a proactive entity, and that was our experience.
The gentleman's time's expired. The committee will stand in recess